Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program making a return appearance for the first time in a few months, Dieter Kurtenbach. He is back. He works for the Mercury News out in the Bay Area. You know, again, just terrific friend of the podcast and a good friend of the program. We like to have him here.
I love being here, Sam, but I'm starting to get a little creeped out by all the accommodation. Not going to lie to you.
I give everyone great commendation.
I know. It makes me almost think that you're full of it.
No, only half the time.
Okay. We'll figure out which half that is today.
This podcast is first and foremost sponsored by Hims. We'll get into forhims.com/game theory later on. But this podcast is going to be all about NBA over-unders. It's going to start a series that we are doing on the Game Theory Podcast about NBA over-under win totals. It's going to be 4 podcasts, all with Dieter. We're going to break down 8 teams today in the Eastern Conference, 7 teams in the Western Conference, or on the Eastern Conference on the next podcast, 8 teams in the West, 7 teams in the West in the next 2 podcasts after that next week. We're recording this a little bit ahead of time just because I am going to Australia. I've said that many times on the podcast. So this is being recorded August 22nd at 7:30 Pacific time. We're assuming that nothing stupid is going to happen.
That's truly the stupidest thing we've ever done.
But I don't know what to think of that.
We can't guarantee that. We can't. This is the NBA. You can't guarantee that.
We can't guarantee that. So,
but we're going to try. We're going to endeavor nevertheless.
We're going to make a real solid effort. We're using the Westgate over-unders as of this date. Again, we're assuming there's not going to be like a wild amount of movement on these. You know, a half win total over-under. You know, sometimes that can make a difference, but we're hoping it's not going to be too super crazy. And yeah, we're going to go in alphabetical order as well. I think that's worth noting. So we're going Atlanta, Boston, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, and is Indiana in this one as well?
We can have them in there. All I know is that the top of that list, I mean, get excited over some of those teams. Though, to be fair with the over-unders, I mean, that's the beauty of the over-under. Like, we can get into Atlanta over or under 23. There's interest. There's intrigue there, despite the fact that there probably won't be much interest or intrigue for, I don't know, like 50-something games of the Hawks season.
Yeah, I'm fascinated in Atlanta's number, weirdly.
Yeah, me too.
Do we have anything we want to talk about before we get going, though?
I mean, no. We need to get into this. There's a lot of stuff to cover, Sam. Like, there's no time for dilly-dallying.
Yeah. Like, my brain is scattered as well because we're doing this like right after the Urban Meyer thing.
You're messed up right now. We never have these problems at Missouri. Oh, wait.
Oh, God. So I'm like...
College football.
Trying to, like, look at my Twitter mentions, which are a disaster, as well as trying to, like...
I think I need to spend some time looking at your Twitter mentions. That sounds incredible.
It's bad. Like,
it's probably a little bit worse for you, considering that, you know, they're coming to you. But for me, it's just tremendous entertainment.
Yeah, like, I mean, I tend to give my opinion. Like, Mark Titus also tends to give his opinion.
Yeah.
On, like, our mentions, like, I've looked through his and I've looked through mine. I'm just like, oh, we're just not going to pay attention the rest of the way, I think.
This is terrible for our country, but it is tremendous content.
Oh, thanks, Darren. Let's get into Atlanta. The Atlanta Hawks, they're over-under, again, according to Westgate, is the book that we're going off of. 23.5. We're just going to give a little run through the top of all of these, discussing some, you know, just important numbers from last year, some of the losses that they had over the offseason, and some of the pickups that they've had over the course of the offseason as well. So last season, they had 24 wins. Their expected win total based off of their net rating was 27. They were 26th in offensive rating, 21st in defensive rating. They lost Mike Muscala, Dennis Schroeder, Malcolm Delaney, and head coach Mike Budenholzer. They picked up Jeremy Lin, Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, Justin Anderson, Alex Len, Amari Spellman, and they have a new coach in Lloyd Pierce. What are your initial thoughts here?
My initial thoughts are I'm curious to see how hard the Hawks tank this year.
Yeah.
Because clearly they're playing the long con. Travis Schlenk, the new GM, former Warriors guy, is playing the long con, and he's trying to build. That said, there's some talent on this team. I mean, there's obviously talent on every NBA team, but there's some guys to really like. John Collins really showed a lot last year.
Yep.
You can see him progressing. I'm not sure he's going to be, a massive impact guy, but he's a winner. He's a guy who can help you win games. I like the acquisition of Jeremy Lin. I think that's an upgrade over Dennis Schroeder. I don't really even want to engage in a debate on that. It's pretty clear cut to me.
If he's healthy.
It was kind of absolutely. Now, it's kind of a questionable, pickup this offseason because, again, this is a guy who can help you win games, and is that Atlanta's goal? I think you just have to take the over of 23.5. They might stumble into it. I mean, this team has 20, in that 20 win range all over it. I mean, but they can push 30. There's a lot of teams that aren't good that can push 30 because there's a big, meaty bottom pile in the NBA these days. I think ultimately you have to take the over. It's just more likely to me in my mind. It's a good number at 23.5, but it's more likely in my mind that they have 24, 25, 27, 28 wins than they're in, the teens. That's just beyond the pale with the talent they have on this roster. And I don't know what Lloyd Pierce is going to be as a coach, but a first-time head coach is definitely not going to want to come out and lose immediately. It's just too hard for him to, put in the systems that he wants, to establish the identity that he wants, if you're going out there and saying, okay, let's go get that number 1 draft pick. So I'm fascinated, of course, to see what Trae Young can do. Mm-hmm. I don't really want to make a judgment one way or another on if he's going to help them win or lose, but he's certainly not a guy who doesn't play with his foot on the accelerator. Kent Bazemore's still a good player. I like Taurean Prince a lot. Dwayne Dedmon is going to help guys win games. The bench is iffy. There's some things to like. They also have Alex Len and Vince Carter. So
they do have Vince Carter. I forgot about that. I was assuming that Vince is going to spend most of his time at the NBA TV studios. I'm sorry.
I think that's about right. I think he just wanted the extra cash because NBA TV has him only on a small retainer. But it is the other thing, too, you have to take into account. I mean, in their division, which means they get these other teams 4 times, that they don't have a lot of good teams around them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who wins that. I mean, we don't talk about divisions very much in the NBA, but I'm not sure if anyone wins that division with an above 500 record, if I'm being totally honest. And that means that there's just going to be wins for everybody. There's no one. The Hawks are just not going to be the doormat for anybody this year. And then 23.5 is a really low number. I think it's the lowest on the Westgate board. So
it is.
I say take the over. There's just too many possibilities in my head that it goes over than it goes under.
So my initial reaction was the same as yours, to take the over. Just kind of based off of the fact that they won 24 last year. They were expected to win 27, and I think that they have more talent on this roster.
Yeah.
Where I'm hesitant on this and why I think I'm actually leaning the under is that Lloyd Pierce is a very defensive-minded coach.
Sure.
He was the guy who ran Philadelphia's defensive scheme last year. Very, very smart on that end. Likes to do quite a bit of switching, assuming he does similar things in Atlanta. I'm very worried about how conducive this roster is to what Lloyd Pierce wants to do defensively.
Totally get that.
Trae Young is going to be really, really bad defensively this year. Kevin Huerter, probably going to be a pretty bad defender this year. John Collins is not a great defender yet. He has some upside there, and we talked about that. I have John Collins as one of the 30 best players under, 23 and under, as Cole and I talked about last week.
Yeah, he's 21. He'll be 21 at the start of the season.
Right. So, I'm a big fan of him, but, look, the defensive talent on this roster isn't great. I am a big fan of Taurean Prince. I got to see him over at UCLA back when I was in Los Angeles, and he was absolutely terrific. When I saw him play 5-on-5 pickup against all of the NBA players, it really showed how valuable he is. As a player, getting to see him, because sometimes he gets forgotten about in Atlanta, I think, but getting a chance to see him play, and he was genuinely probably in the top 25 or so % of players that were playing in that in the Rico Hines run, which features guys like Dante Exum and Kevin Durant was there, and Bradley Beal was there. There were a lot of really impressive players there, and he was genuinely very good. My guess is he's probably going to be their best player next year. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know that that's enough offense for me.
That's valid. Considering that they're probably going to be giving up 108, 109, 110 points per game.
Yeah, you're
are they going to be able to put that up?
Yeah, you're assuming that Trae Young is to take the over on this. I think you're assuming that either Trae Young is the rookie of the year and has like positive efficiency, or at least like league average efficiency, or you're taking that Jeremy Lin comes back with no questions from injury, right?
Yeah, and I think I lean towards the latter, which isn't necessarily a fair assumption, but I just like Jeremy Lin. I'm not going to root for injury or him not coming back 100% healthy. I'll err on the side of optimism in that regard. The other thing, too, and I mentioned it earlier, I just don't see a lot of games that are locked-in losses, particularly in this division and the Eastern Conference as a whole. So I just think there are wins to be had, and I don't necessarily agree that Trae Young needs to be consistent and have that, league level. He can have the spikes and the valleys. He just needs to have spikes at the right time. And I think he's going to have enough of those spikes that are going to straight up win games. He's an exciting player. That stuff's infectious. I think it's going to steal some games here and there, and that's really the difference. So, maybe that's just baseline optimism from me, which is kind of a rarity, but 23.5 is low. If it was 25.5, I'd probably take the under. 23.5, it's right on, and I just see, I don't know, I just like the guys on this team too much to totally call them an under.
Yeah, and it's kind of like run clustering in baseball, right? Like if Trae Young goes off in certain games and is terrible in certain games, it actually helps their over-under potential. Yeah, I do get that, but the last point...
It's a good push number, to be fair.
It is, yeah. Like, I would stay away from this generally, but I have to give a pick. The last thing that pushes this more toward the under for me is that I think that if we get down to the end of the year and they need to start winning games, probably not going to be something they want to do.
No, that's absolutely accurate. But, I mean, that knife cuts both ways because, of course, this is the first year of lottery reform, no?
Is it? I should know that.
Yeah, I figured you would know. Somewhere in the back of my head, that's what it is, and we're all coming across as super experts right now.
But it's 2019.
Yeah, so first year
I couldn't remember if it was
reform,
2019 or 20, but yeah.
This is another thing. I mean, thank God that's the case because I really took that assumption for granted in a couple of these picks. There's not as much of an impetus to tank hard at the end of the year now, just because there's the variance between. I mean, it's still there. Don't get me wrong, but the variance between the number one overall pick and I think it's just not as wide as it used to be.
Well, the big impetus I think is setting yourself into a spot, isn't it? Like you can only drop a certain level. Like I feel like it's almost that you don't like tanking now in the NBA is almost so that you don't drop below a certain level.
That's fair. Yeah.
As opposed to having greater odds at the number one pick, for instance.
Right.
So yeah, it's tough. This is a good number. I'm going to stay away from it, but
agreed.
I think I do lean under just in adjustment to new coach, rookies, injuries, and the potential for tank at the end. But I think that it's basically about right.
Yeah, and I'm over just because Jeremy Lin is a solid pro. I like what Taurean Prince and John Collins have going in, as they progress in their careers. And, the new coach thing comes the other way, and they play in a bad division and a bad conference. And when you add in Trae Young's ability to electrify, I think they're going to steal a couple of games that they probably shouldn't win, and that will be the difference.
Yeah, I think that's completely reasonable. Let's move on. Boston, their number is 58. If I remember correctly, that is the second highest number on the board behind the Golden State Warriors.
It is. For
some background, they won 55 games last year. They were expected to win based off of their net rating, 51, 18th in offensive rating, first in defensive rating. The only loss I have for them is Greg Monroe. Is that all that you have?
That is accurate, which is shocking because I forgot Greg Monroe was on that team.
Right. They gain Brad Wanamaker, but more than that, they gain a full season of Gordon Hayward.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can count on more Kyrie, but I think that's part of what is baked into this number is more Kyrie. It bakes in a bit more Marcus Smart, who played 55-ish games, if I remember correctly. And it bakes in more Marcus Morris, who also played about 55 games. So I understand why the number is very high. I think that it might be a little too high.
Yeah, that was my initial takeaway. By the way, they did lose, as far as I can tell, Shane Larkin as well, who played 14 minutes a game for them last year. But, that's not he's no Kyrie Irving. I generally, that my gut says too high, that they're not ready to make that leap. But you just take into account what Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward can do, and we just don't know what they're going to be like together.
Yeah.
Hayward only played one game last year. Kyrie played 60, but the end of that wasn't looking so great. You get that, which is in itself worth a handful of wins alone, in my opinion, and you pair that with the natural progression to Jason Tatum, who looked like a damn superstar in the playoffs last year, and Jaylen Brown, who is really finding his stride as an NBA player, and I think is set to make a massive jump. You get another year of Brad Stevens' defensive system. I think you have a deeper roster this year, and you take away LeBron James, you take away some of the competition in the Eastern Conference. 58 is a really good number. It's a really, really good number. I have a feeling, though, that Boston still has something to prove, particularly given everything. I think they have the best record in the NBA at the end of the season. I think they get 60 wins.
I buy that, actually. I think that that's actually really, really quite an interesting idea there. I think that they are going to have something to prove. I actually do like the idea of this roster gelling quickly together. Yeah. Like, Gordon Hayward is an unselfish guy who knows what Brad Stevens is all about. All of these guys around him, I think that they're unselfish enough to make his reintegration pretty easy. Sure. In terms of him, like, the question is, who do they start, right? Like, their best 5 players are Kyrie Irving, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, and Al Horford. I think that's a pretty easy lineup to get on the court at once.
For sure.
I would venture that early in the season they might bring Hayward off the bench.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, and I can definitely see that happening too. Just as he finds his role, he gets his legs under him, gets his confidence back, perhaps more than anything.
Right. That's what I think too. I think that it makes a lot of sense to just kind of let him come along slowly. The thing is, they're just so deep and talented. Like, Shimi Ojale is going to be like their 11th man. I mean, like, Daniel Tice is back. He's very good. Aaron Baines is obviously a very, very useful player. You still have Terry Rozier. You still have Marcus Smart. You still have Marcus Morris coming off the bench. You have Robert Williams, who they drafted out of Texas A&M. He can be something. We know, Wanamaker is a player. I would venture that Robert Williams is going to be spending a lot of time in Maine.
No, I don't disagree with that, but, like, who knows? I mean, it's Stevens. That's the other thing too. I mean, that's the X factor, and it will be really interesting to see. I agree with you that they will probably gel fast, just because there was such a great spirit around this team at the end of last year. Yeah. Kyrie he fits in. I mean, you don't seem to get that angst that you were getting when he was trying to be the man with LeBron in tow. Hayward, as you said, easy as it comes in terms of getting along with him and his game fitting in with other people. There's a lot to like about this. I'm fascinated to see if Tatum can take that momentum that he had in that Eastern Conference Finals and translate it to the 2018-2019 season, because if he can, that is 3 legitimate stars, and that's not even including, good, like Al Horford's not a star in the general sense.
I would definitely call Al Horford a star.
No, you and I know, but I'm talking like casual basketball fan, like people who watch basketball on a daily basis, they know that Al Horford is the real deal Holyfield. But like Jason Tatum's like lead Sports Center with his highlights kind of a star. Kyrie Irving, Hayward is right on the edge of that class, but there's so much to like about this team, and they're not going to be tanking. They're so young, and they're unproven to a certain degree. They're the team to beat in so many regards. Now, the playoffs are a different story, and we will have that conversation way down the line. But ultimately, I think, them going from 55 to over 58 is not – it doesn't take me very much to get there, considering all that they add in. And so I'm taking the over.
I think a big part of that is what you said at the top. They have, I think, something to prove. Like, I think that they're going to come out and try and win as many games as possible. Now,
what a novel concept.
I know, but like a big part of this question too is, though, do we think there is a team in the Atlantic that will push them toward that number? Like,
dude, there's 2 of them.
Yeah, like the big thing is, like, say Boston's sitting at 56 wins at the start of April, is Toronto close enough? Is Philly close enough?
Yes.
To where they have to keep playing. Like that's ultimately what the number comes down to for me. And I think that Toronto is a 50-plus win team, probably assuming Kawhi is healthy, which is a big assumption.
It's an assumption, but I think it's there.
Yeah, and I think Philadelphia, they won 52 last year. There's going to be a lot of positive growth and development throughout their roster. So
we'll get into them, but like the Celtics cannot take the number one seed for granted. That's ludicrous. So
yeah,
they have something to prove, and they're going to have to prove it.
Yep.
So the formula is right there. Now, again, I don't know what the hell that's going to mean come the springtime and the summer, but you have to like the over on this, even though they probably overperformed last year.
And the big thing is here, too. So, like, there's no reason to not buy into them having a top 3 defense next year. I think we've just seen enough from Brad Stevens. We've seen enough from the defensive talent on this roster to assume even, let's say, top 5. I think that they're probably a top 2 or 3 defense, but let's say top 5.
They're right
They were 18th in offensive rating last year, and there is plenty of reason to believe that they are going to be a much better offense next year with the inclusion of Kyrie, with positive development from Tatum and Brown, and with the inclusion of Gordon Hayward.
Is there any reason in your mind to tell me that they're not going to be top 10 in both offense and defense next year?
The only way that I do think that offense top 10 is up for debate if it takes time for these guys to gel. But again, at the top, like, I think that that's possible. Like, if you were trying to build a narrative as to why, a future narrative as to why it didn't happen, I think it would be because they took time to gel. Gordon Hayward wasn't 100% right coming back from injury. And, you know, they just didn't necessarily get the talent. And Kyrie got hurt again. Kyrie played 50 games. That's a very plausible story, but I would bet on them being a top 10 offense.
I think Tatum is such an interest. I won't stop thinking about Tatum until the season starts, because I might even feel comfortable going over 58 if Gordon Hayward didn't play this year.
I wouldn't go that far, but I understand.
It's a stretch, don't get me wrong. Yeah. That's how much I'm infatuated with Jason Tatum right now. And and that's not even to mention what Jaylen Brown can do. And I said off the jump, I think he's poised for a big year, not just in his defensive development, but I think his offense is going to make a leap this year. I don't think he's going to be some superstar or anything in that regard, but he's going to be more than competent on both ends of the court. This team is as well-rounded as any in the Eastern Conference, and it's up there with, you know, the best of the best in the NBA, and I think they have the best record when it's all said and done.
So we're both over on Boston. I did say at the top that I think that number is high, but I only think it's high insofar as that they are the number 2 team. Like, I think Houston's number is low.
Fair enough. But, no, I agree with that. We'll get into that later.
Yeah, but like the Boston Celtics, I think are going to be a very good team, and I think they have a lot to prove, and they play in the East, which is going to be ostensibly an easier conference. There's a lot going toward that number. Let's move on to Brooklyn. Brooklyn's number is 32.5. Last year, they won 28 games, but their expected wins were 31 based off of their net rating. They were 21st in offense, 22nd in defense. They lose Quincy Acey. They sort of lose Jeremy Lin. They lose some of these other borderline guys that they kind of brought in and out, like Jahlil Okafor and who else was like Isaiah Whitehead was there. Like there are a lot of guys that they were kind of testing out that they're going to lose, and they also lose Timofey Mozgov, which, by the way, down at UCLA, Timofey Mozgov is out here draining threes.
Oh, man. Get excited.
If that doesn't show you how good NBA players are, by the way.
No, true. Very true. Very true on that front. But don't expect that shit to carry over into the regular season.
And in terms of their gains, they actually gain a lot of competence. They gain Kenneth Faried, who, you know, couldn't find a spot on Denver. But I think it's fair to say, like, he might be able to crack a rotation in Brooklyn. Okay. Jared Dudley is an interesting fit in what Kenny Atkinson wants to do due to the shooting ability, if he can defend it all. Yeah. John Musa is an interesting off-the-bench scorer, potentially as a rookie who has done it in the Adriatic League, which is an unathletic league, but there will be an adjustment there, but he's done it at a high level. Then they went out and they got 3 of my favorite signings of the offseason. They got Ed Davis on a 1-year deal. Ed Davis is incredibly competent. Shabazz Napier is a backup point guard, incredibly competent. And Travion Graham, who was one of the more underrated rotation players in the NBA last year, I thought. He was just a solid defender. He could do enough offensively to keep them rolling on offense when he played with Charlotte last year. So this would seem like a situation where Brooklyn has gotten better. Their expected wins were 31, and their over-under is 32.5. Also, they should expect to gain more than 48 games from D'Angelo Russell.
And that's where I have my problem.
I understand that. I'm going under for what it's worth.
I'm going under too.
But there's a different reason why I'm going under. I've talked a lot, though. I will let you expound upon D'Angelo Russell.
Well, it's all wonderful, but so much of this, and again, the expected win total is one thing, but they did only put up 28 wins last year, and now they are expecting 33 wins to get an over. You look at the roster. Yes, I love the signing of Ed Davis. I think Napier is a nice, solid backup. I agree with everything you said on Graham and Fareed and Dudley. They've added some talent to this team. I don't know if those guys make up 4 or 5 wins. So ultimately, when I look at this number, what I'm seeing is, okay, maybe a little bit more development from Jared Allen, which, okay, maybe that's a win. Karis LeVert, they get Joe Harris back. That was a great signing. There's a lot of positives, don't get me wrong. And I loved watching the Nets last year because they played hard. They had a great style. They were a team that was easy to get behind, even though they didn't win very often. Russell, with 48 games played, I just don't see him as someone who helps this team win. I don't see him as someone who really fits into the Kenny Atkinson mold altogether. This team is much better when Spencer Dinwiddie is handling the ball, and I understand that Russell can play off the ball. And I don't like that backcourt there.
Just I'm so fascinated by it. I'm so fascinated by it.
And that's where it is, because it could go either way. Don't get me wrong. Like, we all know D'Angelo Russell has a ton of talent, but I don't bet on D'Angelo Russell. That's just something I don't do. And so much of this line, set at 32.5, seems to be tied to D'Angelo Russell playing a theoretic full season. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. And that sucks because I really do like the Nets, but I'm not buying what D'Angelo Russell's selling. And I'm not going to do it until he proves me wrong.
So it's hard because I'm not sure necessarily that they need D'Angelo Russell to be good if they decide to keep Spencer Dinwiddie.
Agreed.
That's a big question to me. Spencer Dinwiddie is on a bargain basement contract that literally every team in the league is going to be able to trade for at the deadline.
Yes.
The Golden State Warriors are going to be able to say, hey, we want a rental backup point guard. We're a little bit worried about the way that Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston are aging. Spencer Dinwiddie's perfect for our scheme, and he's super, super cheap on a minimum contract, so we can actually go get him.
Just to put this in context, he's making $1.65 million. He's 25 years old.
Yeah. So,
that is totally abnormal.
Yeah. So, I would imagine there's going to be a robust trade market for him. I don't think this is a playoff team either. So,
no.
They have to have conversations with him and decide if it's possible for them to re-sign him. Maybe he's a very loyal player. He wants to continue playing for Kenny Atkinson, who helped him blow up and be among the most improved players in the NBA. Mm-hmm. But if he wants to test the market, they realistically probably have to trade him.
For sure.
And that's complicating. This is also the first season where Brooklyn...
I was wondering when you were going to say that. I think this is more than anything else. I skimmed over it in my notes because I got so flustered about D'Angelo Russell, but this is the biggest thing right here.
Yeah, Brooklyn, this is the first year that they're going to have their first-round pick at the top of the draft if they so choose to have it, because their deal with the Boston Celtics, the ill-fated Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett deal, is finally expired. So it's going to be interesting to me to see if, when it comes down to it, Sean Marks and that coaching staff, that general manager combination, and front office and everything decide, we want to play the kids. We want to play Jared Allen 35 minutes a night. We're going to move DeMarre Carroll because we think he might be able to help a contender. We're going to move Spencer Dinwiddie. Joe Harris is on a reasonable contract that we can move, and just build around the kids and, stealth tank while that happens. And then next summer, we're going to have 2 max cap spaces and a lottery pick. Maybe that's enticing for an interesting player who wants to move to New York City.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, that, and that's the big thing. Now, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fleshed out before they're in position, honestly, to go out and get a real max player, not someone they're overpaying, but someone who can make an impact immediately. But there's some competent. I like a lot of guys on this team. I just don't see the leap that Westgate is, putting them at. I don't see that in the cards. It just seems like there's just far more possibilities that they come in at the under than they get in at the over, just given everything that's in flux.
I understand why the number is higher, just from this is a more talented team than they were last season.
Yes.
Like, unquestionably.
Not massively, though.
I think it's pretty substantial.
It's definitely,
there's a lot more competence
an upgrade. It's unquestionably an upgrade.
But
I
there's
don't know
also,
if it's this dramatic upgrade, though.
For a regular season, though, there's a lot of night in, night out competence in getting Ed Davis, Travion Graham, Shabazz Napier, and Kenneth Freed. Like, those guys are all going to play hard. You're not wasting as
many minutes as you did last year.
They're all going to suck to play against if you're an opposing team. Like, there's actually a lot there, I think, that is interesting. So, I understand why this number is higher. I am still going under.
Yeah, I honestly, personally would love for the Nets to do it because, again, as I said, that they play such an entertaining brand of basketball. They go hard every night, or at least until it's very clear that there's no reason to go hard anymore. It'd be good. It'd be good for the soul for the Nets to, I don't think it's going to take that many wins to get the number 8 seed in the Eastern. It'd be nice for them to make a run at it. I don't think they get there, but it'd be nice for them to make a run at it. I just don't see it in the cards.
I still think it takes 40 wins to get into the Eastern Conference playoffs, by the way. I will say that.
I mean, right now, just the Westgate numbers, I mean, the Eastern Conference goes, the way that they have it broken down. Celtics, Raptors, Sixers, Pacers, okay, obviously. Bucks, Wizards, Heat, Pistons. The Pistons are set at
38.5, I think.
37.5.
Yeah. So, I think that...
No bueno.
Yeah. I mean it's...
How many different... It's 4-5 game difference from what the Nets are. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair.
Still, I'm taking the under.
I'm still taking the under as well.
You want to talk about enigmas? Here we go.
The Charlotte Hornets are a fascinating team for a lot of reasons, and I think this is a reason why I think that the number gets over 40. They won 36 games last year. Their over-under is 35.5. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They won 36 games last year. Their expected win total was 42. They had a lot of bad luck in close games, as they have over the course of Steve Clifford's tenure there. They did.
Kind of this thing.
13th in offense, 16th in defense. They lose Dwight Howard, Travion Graham, Michael Carter-Williams, and obviously Steve Clifford. They gain Bismack Biyombo, Miles Bridges, Tony Parker. I think Devontae Graham can play an interesting role. And they bring in James Borrego as their new coach. In terms of stylistic stuff, Borrego is a defensive-minded guy, so I don't know necessarily that emphasis is going to go away. Honestly, the Spurs also played a pretty similar drop-back style with their bigs. Now, how much of that was... roster-based, how much of it was what Borrego would prefer to do? It's questionable. I don't know. But I don't know that we necessarily have a great indication because Borrego's a first-time, full head coach. If I remember correctly, he was an interim.
He was in Orlando.
Yeah. But this is going to be his first real rodeo as a head coach. So he's going to want to implement his style, and we'll see where that goes. Ultimately, what this number, I think, comes down to is how they start. I think that if they start strong, and by the way, their schedule is kind of a mess. If I remember correctly, they have a lot of back-to-backs. They have a relatively difficult schedule as well. But if they can start well, I think that this team should be in relatively okay shape. They get Detroit, Atlanta, Milwaukee, Denver, Houston, Orlando, Memphis, Milwaukee, San Antonio, Minnesota, New York in their first 11. 5 road games versus 6 home games. If they can get out to a 7-4 start and they decide to keep Kemba Walker at the deadline, that's what I'm building to.
That's the big thing.
If they can decide to keep Kemba Walker past the deadline, which it seems like Michael Jordan does not have an interest in trading Kemba Walker.
Everyone else in the league does, though.
Right. I think this number goes pretty drastically over, actually. I think that it's a 4 or 5 win over, and I will probably actually bet on this over.
Yeah, this was far and away my biggest over bet. I can see 40 wins very easily for this team. I have a hard time seeing a circumstance where they only win 34, even if Kemba goes. just because, I mean, there's a lot of guys that listen, let me tell you the things I don't like about this team first. I don't like their center situation. Don't like it one bit. There's a lot of guys. I'm not sure any of them can make a consistent impact. I don't like the fact that there's not a clear number 2 to Kemba Walker. I mean, maybe that guy's Malik Monk. Maybe not. Maybe it's Jeremy Lamb.
No,
probably not. I know, but I mean, that's my point. Like, Nicholas Batum.
Yeah, I think
call it what it is.
Yeah, I think you're hoping for regression from Batum. That might be adventurous.
That's really pushing. I mean, he looked shot last year. I mean, it was really rough because he was supposedly healthy. I mean, he only played 64 games, but the games that he was apparently healthy in, he did not look like the Nicholas Batum, and it was just the very clear, well, we saw the hill. This is the downslope. Michael Gilchrist is a good player. He doesn't do it for me. Marvin Williams is a good player. It doesn't do it. So what you're hoping for is sort of depth and baseline competence. First-year head coach, sometimes that works out. Sometimes they just need a different voice, and it sparks, a little bit something extra from a roster of guys who have something to prove after a season that really went as poorly as one could have imagined. The Kemba thing rules over all of this. Ultimately, I have a hard time seeing a tremendous market for him. He's such a peculiar player in this current league. Undeniably talented, undeniably good. I just don't know how robust of a trade market he will have come the deadline and what Charlotte is even looking for. So I just have to take the over again for some of the reasons that I think I'm taking the Hawks on the over. They play in a crap division. I honestly think that they could win the Southeast. I
don't think that's out of the cards. What do we think of losing Dwight Howard for them? Because as much as he was problematic for many of the reasons that Dwight Howard has been problematic over the last few years, he averaged almost 17 points a game, 12.5 rebounds, 1.6 blocks. He was someone that they could actually rely on to get a basket at times.
Right.
That actually really helped them sometimes. Like
it did. That is an issue. We don't say that a lot in the modern NBA where there's not enough guys to get buckets. Usually it's an issue of there's not enough guys who can actually play defense. The Hornets have the other issue, and they're not exactly rock solid on defense either. So, in fact, they're pretty bad on defense, all things considered.
They were league average last year. Like they were worse than I think they've been in the past. They looked a little bit more problematic. This was a team that finished 8th in 2016 in defensive rating. They were top 15 the year before. They took a small step back in 2018. I think ultimately it's just going to be a very different defense because Borrego's in charge, and it's going to look different. Now, is different good? Is different bad? I'm not entirely sure. What I will say is that you can expect to get more games than 33 from Cody Zeller, who is a genuine starting center in the NBA. You can,
we can have a conversation about that down the line. I understand your optimism about him. I get it. That's a different conversation we'll have at midseason.
Well, look, I mean, over the last few years, he's been like a consistent 13-10, 13-9 guy who can move his feet defensively and actually is like okay rim protection numbers from what you would expect and is super efficient. Like, he's like a bottom 10 starting center in the NBA, but I think you can get away with it.
I don't disagree. I don't think you can get away with it on this team.
Probably not. That's probably fair.
I mean, that's the kicker. I mean, I'm sure that the Warriors would love to have Cody Zeller, but the Warriors don't need a player like that. The Charlotte Hornets need all 5 of their starters plus, 5 extra guys on the bench if they're going to win 40 games this year. There's a lot of reasons to be down on them. Ultimately, though, they were better than they performed last year. There's a lot of weird crap that happened last year. A first-year head coach is, I would venture with a team like this, more likely to have success. The Dwight Howard thing, yes, he wasn't as bad. He's not the total caricature that people make him out to be. At the same time, there were a lot of stat padding games at the end of that season. I mean, didn't he go for like 30 and 30 in a game? Yeah, I mean, he was really Dwighting it up at the end. Declaring himself the greatest center in the NBA, crap like that. Like, really, really putting that impact on in garbage time. I think getting rid of him, I don't want to make it this huge thing. There is going to be at least some addition by subtraction with Dwight Howard. Just some.
But like the big question is it more addition by subtraction, or is the subtraction substantial enough?
I think that the arrow points slightly up, if not, I'll give you neutral when you get rid of Dwight Howard. Yes, he had an impact. I don't know if they can necessarily replace it, but they're certainly not going to miss the level of weird and the unreliability. As much as you said, yeah, he's a guy who can get him a basket, wasn't necessarily in the flow. Yeah, it really messed up the ideology of that basketball team. Kemba's not a guy who is capable. I mean, he can do a lot of stuff, but
Kemba's not. I will accept no Kemba slander on this podcast.
Kemba's a stud in kind of this old school way, though. Like, he's not a flowy player. That's not some guys aren't flowy players. That's not a knock. I obviously have a stylistic preference, but Dwight Howard's not a flowy player. I would prefer to have some guy who can just go with the flow playing opposite Kemba Walker, because he's going to be the force, and you got a bunch of guys who just fill in the space. When you got Dwight Howard, who still reckons himself to be a force, and Kemba, who still reckons himself to be a force, you got two hard objects batting against each other, even if they got along, by all accounts, A-okay. And it didn't look that disjointed on the floor. I just like the flow concept better, and I think that they're going to be in a better position this year. Batum and Kid Gilchrist and Williams, and I don't know when we're going to end up just eventually writing off Frank Kaminsky, but they have a lot of flow guys, a lot of guys who can just come in, give competent minutes. We also haven't mentioned the fact that Tony Parker's on this team now, which is super friggin' weird.
Well, it's a great, I think, addition, if only because he'll be able to help out with Borrego.
Totally, 100%. He's a good assistant coach to have on the court. He's going to keep things. He's just going to command respect, keep things in order. I think this team is going to be a lot calmer than they were last year. It seemed like things just got weird and chaotic, and Stan Clifford's gone, and it's, Jordan's laissez-faire ownership doesn't help things for sure. But I'm just going to buy into them just going out and doing sort of what it is that this kind of a roster should do, and that's win 38 to 40 games, which is a nice over number compared to what Westgate's given us.
I think they win 40. I think that they are, at the very least, in it for the 8 seed if they do not get the 8 seed until the end of the season. And I mean, that would require them keeping Kemba Walker. It just seems, based off of every indication, that that's what they want to do. So,
so keep your trade machine nonsense to the side. Kemba's going nowhere. You heard it here first.
Well, much like the Hornets want to keep Kemba, I would like to keep my hair. But 66% of men lose their hair by the age of 35. But the thing is that when you start to notice hair loss, it's too late. It's easier to keep the hair you have than to replace the hair you've lost. If that hairline is slowly starting to move backwards, if you've got some bald spots, if you've got any sort of, anything you got to worry about up there. How are you going to feel? Thin. Yeah, how are you going to feel a year from now if it's not business as usual up there? forhims.com is your solution. It is a one-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and sexual wellness for men. I mean, look, sometimes you got to help out your hairline. I mean, look, my hair, it's not great.
Yeah, we don't want to talk. I mean, it's going. I've seen it happen. I'm seeing it happen in real time. It's bad. It's not bad. It's there. And you know what? You do a great job with it. But every now and again, you just need someone to stick a hand out and say, let me help you up here. And I guess that's what Hims is doing.
And while Dieter does not need this crazy
I have so much goddamn hair.
Some of us do. And thanks to science, baldness can be optional. Hims connects you with real doctors and medical-grade solutions to treat hair loss. It is well-known generic equivalents to name-brand prescriptions to help you keep your hair. There's no waiting room, no awkward doctor visits. You save so many hours by going to forhims.com. This is what my listeners can do. If you order now, my listeners get a trial month of Hims for just $5 right now while supplies last. See the website for details. This would cost hundreds if you went to a doctor or a pharmacy. Go to forhims.com/game theory. That's forhims.com/game theory. forhims.com/game theory. Next team on our list here, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Oh boy, this one is just... Or no.
Wait a minute, are we skipping another great over pick here?
Oh, you're taking the over with Chicago?
Uh-huh.
Oh boy. This is going to
Yeah.
be fun. That was my initial reaction, but I have since come around.
Then I don't need to hear from you, sir.
The Chicago Bulls, Dieter's favorite team in the world, as a
They're trying to kill me.
Chicago native. He's trying to just absolutely deal with this mess of a front office.
Just let me have optimism for like a month.
Last year they won 27 games. Their expected win total was 23. Their offensive rating was 28th. Their defensive rating was 23rd. They lose, 50 games of Nikola Mirotic, David Waba, Noah Vonleh. I don't believe they have Paul Zipser anymore.
No, Paul Zipser is off into the wind. I think he's going back to Germany.
It's a shame. It's an absolute shame. Am I missing anyone else?
Sean Kilpatrick was apparently on this team.
He's not bad. He can play a little bit. But they gain Jabari Parker, Wendell Carter, and Chandler Hutchison. Those are the three names I've got.
Those are factual pickups. Beyond that, Antonius Cleveland, who I doubt will be on this team at the beginning of the year, and Raleigh Alkins. Oh, he can play. He's on a two-way.
We'll go with that. So where I'm at with this team is it is certainly talented. You will get more games out of Zach LaVine. You will get healthier games out of Zach LaVine. You will get Jabari Parker. You will get maybe Wendell Carter, like playing 20 minutes a night. Because Robin Lopez is going to play. They have to find minutes for Lauri Markkanen at the 5, I think, because you have to find minutes for Jabari Parker at the 4.
Yep.
So I'm just very concerned about how this entire thing fits together. I don't see a world where they aren't a bottom 3 defensive team.
That is fair. Despite the fact that Chris Dunn is probably a pretty good defender, it is completely fair.
Like, I'm
look
someone
down
who
this
thinks
roster and
Chris
you're like,
Dunn is like,
oof.
I think Chris Dunn's like one of the 5 or 6 best defensive guards in the league. Like,
and it doesn't matter.
I'm a big Chris Dunn guy. He is awesome defensively. There are questions offensively there, but he is very, very good defensively. The problem is that I don't know where the rest of the defense comes from. Because Markkanen was a little bit better than what you'd expect, but Zach LaVine and Jabari Parker are not good defenders. Denzel Valentine, not a good defender.
No, he
They
isn't.
lose David Waba, who was one of their best defenders last year.
Yes, and a very good player, and I still have no idea why they got rid of him. But
Agree.
I think the second best defensive player on this team might be Robin Lopez, if not like Chandler Hutchinson, and that obviously portends not great things. At the same time, I am so all in on Lauri Markkanen, it hurts. And this is just unbridled, probably poorly thought through hype. I think this team has a chance to put the ball in the hoop at a pretty nice clip this year for stretches. And let's not forget, the Bulls absolutely overperformed for a good run there last year before they realized that they were messing everything up and that they should stop winning. And they did a wonderful job when they got around to doing that. There is some stuff to be excited about, though, when you take into account Zach LaVine, who I think might be suited for some more ball handling opportunities. Parker, who is coming in. There's no need to feed the ball to Jabari. He can just fit in somewhere. Just find a role. That's where he's at in his career. I know he's getting paid good money, but he doesn't have to be a superstar anymore. Maybe that frees him up a little bit to just find a spot. Yes, it's a crowded front court, but I think we see something from him, a little bit of pizzazz. Lopez is still competent. Bobby Portis is still an NBA player who is pretty good at times.
Pretty big Bobby Portis guy. Having said that, I think that they should move on. I agree. Midway through the
use,
year,
I don't know, like a 2 or 2.
Use a wing.
Cameron Payne is still on this team, which is making me really regret my overpick here. But and so is Cristiano Felicio. But
my favorite Bobby Portis trade is something that will drive Chicago Bulls fans insane.
Just do it.
Go get Tony Snell from the Bucks.
Yeah.
I'm trying to murder friend of the podcast Ricky O'Donnell with that take.
Yeah. Well, I hope Ricky's still alive for everybody's sake, but I felt the hurt there vicariously. Denzel Valentine's not very good, but that's fine. I like Hutchinson, and I like Carter a lot, and I'm all in on Markkanen. I think LaVine is going to give you solid minutes with a nice upside chance. more than anything else, despite the fact that this roster is terribly lopsided and the Bulls really aren't going to be pushing for a playoff spot in any real sense, so they might as well lose as much as possible.
Oh no, I think that they think they're pushing for a playoff spot.
Well, and this is where I'm at. They're not going to, but they think that they can.
Yeah.
Delusion can get you a long way in this world, and I think the Chicago Bulls 27 is not a very big number in this Eastern Conference. You also take into account the fact that Fred Hoiberg finally has a team that sort of kind of can play the way he wants to play on offense. Kinda, which is way more than you could say in any prior year. I don't know. I think that there's some positive vibes around this team, despite the fact that the organization is a complete tire fire. They have the right amount of delusion when you're looking to bet an over, and I'm feeling optimistic for 1 month out of the damn year, so let me have this.
I'm here for it. I understand. I mean, the fact that the number that throws me here is the fact that they were only supposed to win 23 games last year.
Right.
Like,
this is what I'm talking about with delusion.
They get 7 games better, like, off of expected results. 7?
But it's only 1 game better than what they actually did.
That's
and
3.
Let's not forget,
well, it's 3 games better than they actually did to take the over. It's 29.5.
29? I'm looking at 27.5. What the hell are you looking at?
The Westgate. I've got the Westgate's 29.5,
okay.
man.
Well, shit. Take the under. I have written down here that this team can win 31 games in the best possible universe.
I think
that's where my head's at.
You can squint and get so it's 29.5. They have 28.5 at BetOnline, 29.5 at the Westgate. I
Maybe
understand.
It'll be 27 by the time this conversation's over.
Yeah, I understand why you can get to 29, or you can get to like 35 if Jabari Parker is awesome and Zach LaVine is healthy and Wendell Carter is as good as he was at Summer League. And they find wing play and Chris Dunn takes another leap. I get it. I think 29.5 is like basically right on, and I'm going to stay away from this because I think there are too many variables up in the air. But I'm still going under just because I don't think like this was the 28th.
Listen, this is the logical stance.
Yeah.
Let's just establish that. This is the logical stance. They're going to suck at defense. Their roster's a total mess, even though it has talent. I have no idea how Fred Hoiberg still has a job other than the fact that the Bulls are a completely disorganized organization.
Yeah.
Mark me down for the power of delusion.
I'm here for it. I'm going under. I'm just assuming they're going to have a bottom 3 defense, and it's really hard to get to 30 wins with a bottom 3 defense unless you have LeBron. And speaking of that, the Cleveland Cavaliers did just that last year. 30.5 over under 50 wins. They won 43 expected though. 5th in offensive rating, 29th in defensive rating. They lose LeBron. They lose Jeff Green. Their additions, Sam Decker, Colin Sexton. I'm staying all the way away from this. I have a pick, but I don't really know what to think.
I'm taking a hard over, and I think it comes in on delusion as well.
That is my pick. I do have over. But the reason I'm staying away is I just don't know how this roster functions without LeBron. And
no, totally. It's a bad team.
Everyone is kind of expecting the Kevin Love of old, and I would
Nope.
It'd be amazing to see the Kevin Love from Minnesota who dropped 26 points and 12.5 rebounds and 4.5 assists. It's startling how much you see big men drop off as they age into 30, 31. Maybe he scores 22, 23 a night, but it's hard for me to see him doing it on super high efficiency, even as he comes off of the most efficient season of his career, just because he's in a totally different setting now.
1,000%. You also have to take into account, you got George Hill, who's still on this team. I don't think George Hill's given a good, solid professional effort in a while now.
Well, I actually think he did in Cleveland last year, but here's the thing.
LeBron James disagrees.
He played on a shitty team in Sacramento last year and did not care.
No, he did not care.
Yeah.
And then LeBron called him out. He subtweeted him in real life by saying some guys aren't for the moment. So that happened. That was fun. So I don't know what the hell you're going to get from George Hill. That might have just straight up ruined him. Might not have. He might come back. He's a solid player when he's playing well, even though he's coming up on 33. J.R. Smith also 33. He's still a thing. Kyle Korver
here's the thing with George Hill too. they're going to give Colin Sexton minutes.
But George Hill can play off the ball.
That's what Sacramento thought.
No, but he can if he wants to.
Yeah.
He has. I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I'm not saying he's a really good 2, but he's not a dick about it, which is a start for most point guards. Tristan Thompson's still on this team. He can give you some minutes. I mean, he's not worth what he's getting paid, but he can give you minutes. Jordan Clarkson's on this team. He's going to put up shots. That's a thing. I like Larry Nance a lot. That's a good thing.
He'll be a great third big man for them.
Kyle Korver is going to get a really nice second-round pick here in a couple of weeks. Maybe Cedi Osman. Maybe he does a thing. Here is where
strong take. Cedi Osman starts for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
It's not a strong take at all. That seems like a very logical and straightforward opinion.
Okay, sorry, stronger take. Cedi Osman is the Cavaliers' second best player this year.
Yeah, okay, a bit stronger, but I'm on your wavelength. Here's where I'm taking the over. Colin Sexton is a lunatic person who refuses to lose under any circumstances and might be able to will this team to 10 extra wins than they should get, and this team should really only win about 20 games.
Yeah, I think that it depends a lot on where you're at on Kevin Love.
Let's also take into account that Dan Gilbert wants the playoffs, and there's a good amount of fuck you LeBron sentiment going on.
I think that's why I'm going over. I'm staying away.
It carries early. Yeah. I think it carries early, where they come out and they start 6-3 or something. I haven't looked at their schedule, but just 6-3 or something, and or build up a little bit of a cushion. 10-6, and
so their schedule
get all these random ass narratives.
Their schedule's not a disaster early. It's Toronto, Minnesota, both on the road. And then they get Atlanta, Brooklyn, Detroit, Indiana, Atlanta, Denver, Charlotte, Orlando.
Yeah. I mean, another thing, too, that you have to take into account with this team is it's not as if you have a bunch of guys, yes, while they need to figure out how to play without LeBron, which is kind of a big thing, they're not learning new systems. Tyronn Lue has got something to prove on his own coaching ability, that he can do it without LeBron, that he's the dude for the job. I don't know. You also just have a bunch of bad teams in the East that you can beat up on. 30.5, I agree with you. Stay away from it, and it's probably more likely that they come in under. But man, they got some delusion too, and Colin Sexton is I don't think he's delusional, but he is dripping with winner. And I'm just not going to bet against him not winning more games than he probably should this year. He's got that all over him, and I like the cut of his jib, man.
30.5. I think that they win 33 and miss the playoffs. That's and they never even come close. I mean, we'll talk about maybe they can make the playoffs, in November. Yeah,
they're not coming even close to it. That said, this is also a team that you also have to take into account the organization. This is not going to be an organization that's okay, tank.
Yeah.
They're just not.
They're not going to tank.
Dan Gilbert is not smart enough to say that.
Yeah, they're not going to tank. I am going over, but it's only based off of the fact that Dan Gilbert is just never going to tank.
Right, and that's where I'm at too. Because again, you break down this roster, there's a lot of reasons to think that this could be one of the worst teams in the NBA, but instead they'll be unimportant.
The Detroit Pistons, 38.5 is the number. They won 39 last year, 41 expected wins. They were 19th in offense, 10th in defense. Interesting kind of group coming back. So they've lost.
That's a nice way to say it.
Lost James Ennis and Anthony Tolliver. They gain Kyrie Thomas, Bruce Brown, and they will hope is a full year of Blake Griffin. They're bringing in Dwayne Casey, who is replacing Stan Van Gundy. I think I am tentatively on the over on this.
Yeah.
I think that they get enough synergy between Blake and Andre Drummond to push them over the top and make them, again, right around the 6, 7, 8 seed in the Eastern Conference. I think they get a nice little leap from Luke Kennard, who I think is an underrated player.
Okay.
The key, though, is going to be Reggie Jackson, and it's always been the key for them because behind him is Jose Calderon and Ish Smith, And, like, I enjoy watching Ish Smith, but...
Ish Smith ain't going to get that job done.
Yeah, like, they need more than Ish Smith whenever you're relying on two big men to carry the load for you.
Yeah, this backcourt is rough. I agree with you on Kennard, but, like, that really has to come through because you got Reggie Jackson and Reggie Bullock, I guess, slotted in as the starting guards on this team. Stanley Johnson playing 3. You got Ish Smith, Luke Kennard, Langston Galloway, Glenn Robinson, Jose Calderon, Kyrie Thomas, Bruce Brown. I mean, we're not dealing with the cream of the crop here. This is a top-heavy roster in almost literal way.
Yeah.
I still don't know. I found it interesting. I mean, the biggest dynamic on this team, bar none, I found it interesting. You kind of just glanced over it as I think this is going to work. Like, I don't know if Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond are going to work. I don't know at all. I don't know what the hell Blake Griffin is anymore. I mean, no one's really known for the last couple of years, but putting him in a situation like this, like it feels like a redo of the Clippers experiment when you can't really play him with Jordan. You can't not play him with Jordan. It's a mess. The whole thing's a mess.
Yeah.
Dwayne Casey lost his job for a reason. Nice guy. Decent coach.
You know what? I think he's more than a decent coach. I think he's actually a really good coach.
Okay.
And for
we have differed on that before, and we will probably differ on it in the future.
But you know what? For all of the foibles that we can complain about in the playoffs, all of the issues that he's had in the playoffs,
for sure,
over the last 5 years, 59 wins, 51 wins, 56 wins, 49 wins, 48 wins. More talented team in Toronto, no question.
Absolutely.
But he has gotten good results out of, solid team.
No doubt. And I'm fascinated to see how he fashions this team because really nothing is sacred, save for the fact that you probably have to start both Griffin and Drummond. Everything else, including Reggie Jackson, total crapshoot.
Yeah.
So a lot of potential for a higher number, to be just totally honest, because this roster is not necessarily locked in either. This team did win 39 games last year. And yes, there was a lot of turnover, and they brought in Griffin. And if you remember, when Griffin came in, they went off gangbusters. And then, of course, stopped doing that. I don't know if I like this team, but the number that it's at and the number that they did last year, I don't know if they're appreciative. They're not worse. Are they worse than they were last year?
I don't think so. Personally.
No, okay, so then it's probably a push, but you got to take the over. I can't point to anything in particular that says, oh, well, they're not going to win as many games as they did last year.
Yeah, that's how I feel. It's absolutely how I feel.
That's the entire argument.
Let's move on. Let's talk about the Detroit Pistons are they're interesting to me, but I don't know.
They're unimportant in the scheme of the NBA. At the same time, they're probably going to make the playoffs. I don't know. Eastern Conference sucks, man.
Yeah, it's a little rough. The Indiana Pacers.
Now, this is a team I like.
47.5 is your number. They won 48 games last year. 109.5 offensive rating, 11th in the NBA. 13th in defensive rating. Their expected win-loss was 45, so they outperformed what was anticipated. Their losses, Lance Stevenson.
Okay.
A little bit of Trevor Booker, a little bit of Glenn Robinson, a little bit of Al Jefferson.
Oh, man, Al Jefferson was still on this team last year.
I know, it's shocking, isn't it?
It's good to know.
They bring in Tyreek Evans. They bring in Doug McDermott. They bring in Kyle O'Quinn.
Yeah.
Bring in Aaron Holiday as well, who I think can immediately step in as a backup point guard if Tyreek was to miss games. I think this is a no-brainer over, and I think that they're going to compete for 52 to 54 wins.
Totally agree. Though it's a good number, to be fair. I just like too many players on this team, and I think there's too much built-in progression with this team. Even if Victor Oladipo doesn't make, that secondary leap, I think a lot of people are presuming, even if he just stays at the level, even if he falls back a smidge.
Oh, yeah, I think he's staying at this level. I think
he's staying at this level, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's going back to old, Magic and Thunder Victor Oladipo at all. He's this is him. I don't know if he'll necessarily be as impactful, but Collison is really good. Tyreek Evans is going to take a little bit of the load off of Oladipo, and that's a really positive thing. They keep Thaddeus Young, which I thought was a really smart thing to do, even though it wasn't the easiest decision to make. Miles Turner, I like Miles Turner a lot. I'm not going to come out here and say that Miles Turner is going to make this big leap and be an all-NBA player this year, but he's going to be really good this season.
They need to hope.
I feel that in my bones.
But here's the thing, though. Even if he doesn't make the leap, Domantas Sabonis took the big leap last year.
Exact. And I think he's going to leap again. He's the real deal. Corey Joseph is a solid bench player. I think TJ Leaf has a chance to be somewhat of a real contributor this year. Last year, it seemed like every time they put him out there, it was almost like this perfunctory thing that they had to do because they drafted him high. No, I think that he can actually give you 5 to 10 solid minutes on a nightly basis in his second year. I totally agree with you on Holiday. I want as many Holidays on my team as possible. Aaron, I mean, anyone who has watched UCLA saw the kind of player that he was. He is not going to be an all-star. He's not going to be some guy who is going to get taken high in fantasy drafts, but he is going to be on winning teams his entire career. He's just one of those guys, and this is a winning team. I feel really good about it. I even feel good about Edmund Sumner. Like, that's where I'm at.
I'm here for that. Here's the big thing that I like about what they addressed. This was a team that took the 26th most threes in the NBA last year. They went out, they got Doug McDermott, who is one of the best shooters in the NBA. They went out, they got Tyreek Evans, who over the last 3 years has made like 38, 39% of his threes. Yeah. And, they went out and added Aaron Holiday, who, over his career at UCLA was over 40% every single season. So, overall, he went out and addressed their biggest need. And as long as they continue to kind of tick along with Nate McMillan, as long as we don't see like some weird ass regression from Nate McMillan, I like this team a lot. This is a really competently built team. They're going to beat teams with depth, which over the course of the regular season matters.
Again, a lot.
I think that this is a game. This is a team that I will be betting on. I am betting on their over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as bullish. I'm bullish. Don't get me wrong, for all the reasons that we've both listed out. I don't really have a reason to not bet the over. I mean, that's it.
I will pitch you. I will say, hey, they were a really bad defensive rebounding team last year.
Okay.
That's
cool. If that's where we're at, get it. That's an important thing. Don't get me wrong, but
but they're aggressive. Part of that comes from being overly aggressive, and they force turnovers. They really kind of just try and disrupt you at the point of attack. Again, a great fit with Aaron Holiday. This is a lot. This team
has a lot of potential. I don't know if they push themselves into the upper echelon, but they could, and there's no reason. Everything that they did last year, not an ounce of it was a fluke.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teams that, have a nice jump, perform better than expected, and you can point to it and go, well, that's kind of fluky, delusion or whatever. Nothing about this Pacers team is a fluke. That was a solid base. I think they build off the base. I don't know if it results in, a big old jump, but I have no reason whatsoever, including defensive rebounding, to vote the under on this. So I'm going to vote the over.
Yeah, I'm with you. Dieter, we're through the first half. How are we feeling?
Feeling like we need to get through the rest of this Eastern Conference and then figure out where we're at.
Tell the people where they can find your work.
I'll tell them right now. It's at the San Jose Mercury News. Basketball season is fast approaching. In the meantime, plenty of NFL. And I don't know if you guys have heard about this Oakland A's baseball team that's in my backyard here in the East Bay, but they are quite enjoyable, and no one's really watching, so tickets are cheap. If you got an open weekend, come on out to the Coliseum and experience what baseball was like in 1982. It's really, really quite a story, and I've been spending a lot of time with them, and I think I'd probably be spending some time once basketball season starts with the Oakland A's. That's where I'm at right now. This is the kind of optimism that is dripping through me at the moment.
I'm with that in your life, man. Go to The Athletic, subscribe, keep me employed. Continue on listening to this podcast. I'll have some really great draft content whenever I get back from vacation, at the very least. So
yeah, take care of the business first, man. Vacation is business.
It's accurate. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll talk soon. Bye.